everyone. Welcome to the Kickpoint Playbook webinar. I'm Dana DiTomaso, founder and lead instructor here at Kickpoint Playbook. And today I'm joined by Crystal Carter, head of SEO communications at Wix. And today we're going to be discussing how to get brand recognition in LLMs, a very timely topic that I know a lot of you have questions about. So please make sure to ask questions in the chat and we'll cover those as we go. And if you have to drop out early, we'll be emailing everyone who registered a recording of today's session. And now let's get this rolling. Hey, Crystal.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really
Of
pleased to be
course.
here.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing this presentation. So I saw an earlier version of this presentation at Brighton SEO, and it was one of my favorites. It's like, absolutely, we have to have you on the webinar because I loved it so much. It's funny, but also like important information for people to know. So, as I mentioned, please ask questions in the chat. We'll get to those at the end or during if it's really timely for what you're talking about. And yeah, if you want to get your screen sharing started, we can get rolling with the presentation.
Okay. All right. I'm just going to put it into slideshow, and then we're going to click on to share my screen. Wait for it, and here we are.
All right.
Great. Wonderful. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm sure, just like everyone else, you have been having these conversations around your organizations about how you track this and how you find out and what's going on with all of these LLMs, because everyone's using them all the time. I know I certainly am. I have one. I use the Copilot assistant, and it's got a lovely voice, and I call him Bay Eye, for instance. So like, there's just like a thing, like everyone's using them all the time, and everybody wants to see what's going on with it. So I'm Crystal Carter. I'm the head of SEO communications over at Wix Studio. I do enterprise SEO. I do thought leadership. I do comms leadership. I do course instruction. You can see a lot of my exploits over on the Wix Studio Learning Hub and lots of other places as well. And I've been very lucky enough to share a stage with Dana DiTomaso on more than one occasion, which is always a joy. So today we're going to talk about lots of things AI, and I'm going to be helped by my twin sister, the other Mrs. Carter, Beyonce Knowles, throughout this presentation. So today we're going to cover why generative search engine visibility matters. And I've got engine in quotation marks because it's not exactly a search engine. However, many people are using it in that way, and I'll get into that. We're also going to talk about how to monitor visibility. And anyone who's been following Dana is, I'm sure, very interested in that kind of thing. And then also, we're going to talk about how to optimize for generative search engines. And people have not quite settled on a title for this. So some people are calling it LLMO, LLM optimization. Some people are calling it GEO, generative engine optimization. There's lots of things like that. But we're going to talk about visibility in LLMs. So one thing that's really important is, yes, we are talking about that, but we are not going to talk about AI overviews. And the reason why, you might be asking, I thought this was an AI conversation, so why aren't we talking about that? But the reason why is it essentially comes down to user journey. So LLM is the tool for the search. So if you are carrying out a search, if you say, tell me what was the impact of Demi Moore's speech at the Golden Globes, you're using the LLM to give you information. You're using it as a search tool. If you go on to Google and an AI overview shows up, it's just a search feature that shows up. And that's not the same, right? Part of that is because users choose an LLM for search. However, users just happen upon an AI overview. It just sort of shows up. And that's, again, is not the same. Additionally, users interact with LLM responses. They go, actually, that's not what Demi Moore said, or that's not correct, and I think you should do it this way, or can you explain it to me like I'm 5, or that sort of thing. And users just receive information from AI overviews. There's not a lot of back and forth with it just now. So that's not the same either. So we're going to be talking about optimizing for LLM brand visibility. And essentially that is the process of increasing references to a brand or a website in LLM responses. And this is something that people should be thinking about for lots of reasons. So why does it matter? Essentially, and these are numbers from October. I will be uploading these again. But basically, a reach of these tools is very prolific. So we're starting to see, millions of people using Gemini, and these are just people who are going directly to the app. This isn't even people who are going through, some of the integrations that we're seeing. So for instance, Copilot is integrated throughout Office 365. Claude is, I think, still standalone, but using a few other things for sort of things. But Gemini is integrated throughout loads of tools, and Google continues to integrate that across. The people who are directly using these apps, we're coming in around 300, just under 300 million for Gemini. We're coming in 30 million for Copilot, 70 million for Claude, 60 million for Perplexity. And of that, even though that might seem really big, ChatGPT is getting the lion's share of this, coming in around 87% of LLM traffic. And that means that they're getting, as of October, they were getting around 2.6 billion visits, and which accounted to around 9 billion monthly page views in 6 minutes per session, which is a lot. And you
I
might
was
say
just going
that,
to say that's incredible, the length of session time. Google wishes that they
right?
got 6 minutes per session.
Precisely. So there's a lot of that there, and these numbers are continuing to increase as all of these tools add more features. So Perplexity recently added something where you're allowed to see sports times and sports scores and things in those elements. Again, ChatGPT and Gemini is adding itself to lots of other features and all of that sort of thing. So people are going to be more and more familiar and more actively using these tools as well. And so we should expect to see these sessions go up. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of energy. That's a lot of pages that people are spending. So even though Google is currently still on top, we're not quite seeing any confirmed drop in Google's search share. Their LLM use is still growing rapidly. And so to the point where Gartner predicts that there could be as much as a 25% drop in search engine use by 2026. And they're also predicting that organic traffic could drop by 50% by 2018. And this all might seem really dark and sad and worrisome. However, we're SEOs. We ruined the internet, and we can do anything. So if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's get into this. How do we optimize for these generative search LLMs? Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to understand what we're working with and what types of LLMs there are. So I'm calling them static pre-trained data LLMs versus search augmented pre-trained data LLMs. And essentially, when you're thinking about your static data pre-trained LLMs, you're thinking about things like things that are not necessarily pulling through web data or not consistently pulling through web data. Now, Gemini does this sometimes. Claude does this sometimes, where they don't pull through information, but Perplexity is always online, right? So they're always search augmented. And then when you have ChatGPT, you have a split. So earlier models of ChatGPT are more of the static end, and then later the ChatGPT 4 is search augmented. And if you're moving through ChatGPT's current situation, they'll also, for most people, you'll have access to the search there as well. Now, the reason why I left ChatGPT in sort of the static pre-trained LLM area is because for things that are like, for things where you're using a tool like, say, a GPT for Sheets, or where you're using an API integration, you might not have the search enabled element if you're using the ChatGPT 3. For some of those tools, you will have the API connected to the earlier model because of cost reasons, because it's cheaper to use the earlier model. You can also upgrade to the other one, but you should be thinking about that when you're thinking about the kinds of responses you should get. Similarly with Copilot, if you're using the Copilot app, my Bay Eye, as I was saying, that's not always pulling through live data. And if you're using the Copilot within Office 365, then you probably are getting web data. And if you want to check that, you can literally just ask them, like, are you able to search the web? Are you able to get live search results as you're going through? So let's talk about the static pre-trained data LLMs. The way we can describe these is essentially you have data sets that are a fixed data training set. And so, for instance, when ChatGPT first dropped, they had information up to around 2021, and that is the information that they had, and they didn't have anything past that. Right. So that's their information training set. And they will have their training sets will vary by platform. And I think that this, as we go forward, could even get more acute. So I think at the moment, lots of people have lots of shared data, but I think that we might even end up in a situation where some of these tools have exclusive rights to certain data and some of them don't. That's me projecting, but that's where I think it might go.
That's interesting. So you think, like, for example, like the Reddit deal with Google, have a Reddit deal with Gemini.
Yeah, I think we
Mm.
could certainly end up in a situation where, like, in a place where data is king, right?
Mhm.
Maybe content's not king anymore, but data is king.
Mhm.
Then we could seriously have a situation where, let's say, ESPN or something has like all the sports data,
Mhm.
or the MLB has all of the sports data for the 2025-26 baseball season,
Mhm.
and they will sell the rights, like people sell the rights to TV
Right.
to one of the LLMs and to not one of the other, to not, some of the other, potentially. I think there's certainly potential there.
Yeah, that makes
Um,
sense.
yeah, and then I think so the other one we have is like visibility. So you're within the visibility for a static data set model. Your visibility will change as the data gets updated. So if ChatGPT has data up to 2021, you have to wait until they add more information before you will see any shifts in visibility. So if you had a thing that happened in 2022 and you were looking to find it on something that was trained on data that only goes up to 2021, you have to wait until they upgrade it to another set of data before you will see that information. And then with some of these things, you maybe will have links and you maybe will not. For some of the ones that have data that's a little bit more up to date, they might have links within them, but they might not be live links. So that might be that they have links that are referenced within their data set, but it's not necessarily the one from last week. And so it's a little bit like the encyclopedia or the phone book. If you remember the phone book, if you're old enough to remember when the yellow pages would drop and you'd get things from like aardvark taxis and that sort of thing, you'd have to wait until the next year if your business opened in between before you could get in the phone book. So it's a little bit like that. So you need to have a think about your training cutoff dates. And these will vary and they will update. And if you are particularly concerned about where you are with your models, then you need to keep on top of those. I have an article that Dana will be sharing later on, which has links to where all of these LLMs have the information about their data sets. So in terms of optimizations, don't expect to see brand new info for some of these more static LLMs that aren't like search enabled. Make sure that you're monitoring the training updates for this, and also tailor your approach for each LLM. Now I'd like to talk to you about a little case study, because I've talked about this and people say, oh, it's all very theoretical. You can't do things with it yet and stuff. And I'm like, well, I mean, kind of. There was a project that I was working on a few months ago, and this is something that we launched from our Wix Studio team, and it is called Site of Sites, and it's essentially a gallery of websites that are built on Wix Studio and that show some of the things that the websites can do and different that are built by different people. And we launched this in the spring of 2024. And I was very curious to see how long it would take for this to show up in some of the LLMs, because it's a brand new property and it's something that we don't always see. So I asked Claude, I said, what is Site of Sites? And they said, oh, it's a concept in archaeology, blah, blah, blah. No. So then I asked, ChatGPT, what is Site of Sites? And they said, oh, it's a web development concept. It's metamorphic use. Yeah, not quite. Then I asked Gemini, I said, what is Site of Sites? And they said the term can mean a couple of things. And one of the things it said is there's literally a website called Site of Sites. And I said, okay, all right, that's good. I like this. And then I asked it again in 2024 or in September 2024, and it said, yes, Site of Sites serves a curated collection of exceptional websites, blah, blah, blah. Fantastic. This is content, remixed from our website. Great, wonderful, fantastic. And because I am an SEO, my next question after I got this fantastic information was, can I get a link? And when it said to me, it said, I apologize for my oversight. There seems to be an issue with the URL I provided earlier. It's not its own website. It's part of Behance. And this enraged me because Behance is a competitor. And I was very, very upset because honestly, Behance, guys, that's not what we're here for. We're talking about Site of Sites. So I told this little robot, I said, bad robot, absolutely no. The website for Site of Sites is at siteofsites.co, and it's not part of Behance. Down arrow, no, bad robot, bad. So then in November, I asked it again. I said, what is Site of Sites? It said Site of Sites is XYZ. And then I said, what is the URL? And it said the URL for Site of Sites is siteofsites.co. Fantastic. Thumbs up on that. Now for this, I would say this is a great technique for anybody who's looking at a small site, big site, whatever, what have you. Give feedback on good and bad responses. If you go to the Gemini documentation, they actively say we're actively looking for feedback on good and bad responses. And this is particularly important if they are giving you factually incorrect information and factually incorrect information that is verifiable, right? So if I say that, I don't know, if I ask ChatGPT, is pineapple acceptable to have on a pizza? And they say yes, and I think no, like that's not really going to that's not really going to be something that I can argue with.
Factually, the answer is no to that.
The answer is no. Nobody
eats
no. Pizza with nobody eats pineapple with hot tomato sauce and garlic.
It's incorrect. Yeah. Yep.
This is why we're friends.
I'm glad we're aligned on this. Yeah. Okay.
Completely. Okay. So when we move over to the search augmented pre-trained data LLMs, we see sort of similar things. So all of the things that you were thinking about for some of the other things still apply, but there's a few other things to consider as well. So when you're thinking about your data set, it will still have a fixed training data set. However, Eric says it's also no. I agree with Eric. Thank you, Eric. However, you'll also have the search will be augmented by search engine results as well. So you'll have the fixed data set, but you'll also have the search engine results. And your visibility will thus be impacted by search engine results. And we'll also include links and references as a rule. So I was talking about Perplexity. Perplexity always has links and references. If you're using Search GPT, then it will include links and references as well. And the way we sort of think about this, Prometheus is the backing behind Copilot, and essentially these kind of work in an interplay. So you have your orchestrator, you have the GPT, you have the way that the index is looking at their information as well, and they will cross-reference all of this to give you your chat answer. So when we think about the search augmentation, it's important to look at where some of the information is coming from. So with Copilot, it's Bing. With Perplexity, they're actually backed by Brave, which is a new search engine, so it doesn't have lots of legacy data, legacy rankings. Gemini is going to be backed by Google. They've not confirmed if they're using other data as well, but they're almost certainly using Google. And then also ChatGPT also has Bing, but they've also said that they're also pulling in other data points as well. So this is important because a lot of people think that the difference between Google and the difference between Bing are really, really similar, but actually they're not. So if you are thinking about ChatGPT and Copilot, which are both backed by Bing, then you should also be thinking about Bing specifically. So for instance, I went through a data set of about 400 keywords from a website that has lots and lots of ranking pages. And I found that there was actually a really big difference between the top ranking keywords on Bing and the top ranking keywords on Google. So of this set of information, there were 10,000 pages that were indexed on Bing, whereas there were 15 times more on Google. And I found that for the same set of keywords, they had 26 fewer top 10 keywords on Bing than they did on Google. In terms of traffic forecasts, for when we look at it across search engine tools or search tools, we saw that Bing's traffic forecast was 5 times lower. And in terms of number one ranking keywords, even though it was the same data set, I looked at top 10 keywords. I found that there were about 104 fewer keywords that were ranking top on Bing than there were on Google. So this means that if you are just assuming that your Google ranking will see you through to ChatGPT, then you should make sure that you have a look through the actual data rather than just assuming. So make sure that you have a look and treat them specifically. Here's an example of what we see for site of sites on Bing, for instance. So if I go to Bing and I look up site of sites, I can see that it's pulling out a few pages there, the collections page, the about page, the main page. And if I go to Copilot and I say, tell me about site of sites, they're pulling out some of these things and they're pulling out the references. I mean, they've also added an ad because they're Bing, but they're pulling out these references that we also see in search. And so this is something that's really important to think about. So when you're seeing your performance on Google or on Bing, then it's worth thinking about in terms of your internal links that you don't ignore your search engine ranking, and that you query your core queries regularly and prioritize the pages that are showing in the LLM. So I know that those pages are showing on Bing search, but I also know that those pages are showing on Copilot already. And that means if I'm thinking about my internal linking, then I should try to prioritize those pages as the sort of, the hub and spoke of your internal linking strategy, so that you're linking pages out from there if you want to get more traffic from an LLM. Now let's talk about optimizations that apply for every LLM. So when we think about LLMs, we need to think about a few things: optimizing for LLM crawl intent, optimizing for augmented LLMs first, managing your brand entities, and getting involved with the platforms. So let's talk about LLM crawl intent. I think it's important to remember that LLMs are not trying to click or rank your content. LLMs are trying to interpret your content. And this is challenging. This is very tricky for us as SEOs, because that's not hasn't been the name of the game for us this whole time. But it's something that's important to think about. So they have a different intent from human users who want to click on your information, and they also have a different intent from traditional search agents who are trying to pull the full navigation and all of that sort of information. So where are all of these search bots? Well, we have lots of information about web crawlers from the tools themselves. So ChatGPT, Copilot, and Gemini, and Perplexity and Claude, they have their own crawlers that go around and look at things on the web. Again, we'll send the article. We'll send the article after the webinar that talks about this as well, and we'll give you links to all of them. And OpenAI has been really, really generous. So they've got all of their information about literally all of the IPs, and you can go through and have a look at all of them. And they've listed them publicly. Common Crawl has been used to train all of the LLMs. So if you have legacy data, if you did all of the things that Dana told everyone to do before UA was retired and stored your data, then you can go and have a look at some of the older versions of the Common Crawl bot that was crawling your site before. You can look at those IPs. They're currently using AWS. However, there are some tools that are able to pick it up still. So I'll show you an example of that later. So for instance, on the Wix Studio bot log report, which is super wonderful, and y'all should all check it out. In the bot log report, we can see lots of bots, lots and lots and lots of bots. And I had a look at Common Crawl and how it performs across the website, and I also compared it to Google Bot's mobile bot. So I'm just checking this one over here. And essentially, when we look at this one, we can see these smaller ones. I don't know if you can see my mouse. Can you see my mouse? Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so these smaller ones here, these are Google's mobile crawl bot, right? And this is a fairly small website. And these are Google's mobile crawl bots. These are the Common Crawl up here. And this site is pretty small. It's literally like under 100 pages. And Common Crawl is coming to almost every single page, almost every single time, because they have a different intent. So you can see that they're crawling the whole time. And when we pull it out, we can see that they're crawling lots of pages that aren't necessary in terms of LLM interpretation. I'm seeing that they're crawling a lot of page one, they're crawling a lot of categories, they're crawling a lot of hashtags, they're crawling a lot of things that don't really matter. And so I think there's lots of people who are going around saying you should block every LLM, you should block ChatGPT from crawling your website. I don't think that's I personally don't think that's the move here. However, you should be managing your crawl. So remember, they're not trying to click or rank your content. They're trying to interpret your content. So they don't necessarily need navigational pages in the same way. They're trying to understand your content. And so there may very well be better pages than certain like pagination pages, et cetera, that they don't need to see. So have a look through your crawl and prioritize. So I went through and I blocked specifically.
If I can interrupt for a second. So are we going back to like the HTML sitemaps? It's like, hey, here's my most important pages in order. Hey, Common Crawl bot, look at this.
I mean, we've opened up a lot of can of worms in this talk. We've already like ignited a pineapple pizza argument in the comments. Hi Haley, hi Eric. And I've always been team HTML sitemap. I'm not gonna lie.
Like, I don't like them, but I also like understand the point of them. It's like I'm really torn on them, but I also wonder too. And by the way, this is a great feature of Wix Studio. If you don't use Wix, Screaming Frog has a log file analysis tool as well that is free up to a certain number of pages. So you can do this with any site at all. You just need access to your log files. And yeah, I also see this when I do log file analysis and non-Wix sites that they just hang out in the tag files, and it's
Yeah,
like you gotta control what they're looking at, otherwise they're gonna waste their time. And this is
absolutely.
where crawl budget most of the time is like, you're not, Amazon, you're fine.
Right.
But for smaller sites, like, you don't need to worry about crawl budget, but maybe you do need to start worrying about crawl budget when it comes to AI crawlers.
Right, absolutely. And I think that this is the kind of exercise that, like, you don't need to do this every month, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're thinking about retainer, or like, let's say you're thinking like, I dedicate like half a day of SEO to every month or something, to what I do, or a whole day or whatever. Like, this is something that you could do every quarter. Like, you can just have a look, see what's going on, and update that. But yeah, if they're spending time in pages they don't need to, like, I go for an all killer no filler approach to crawl budget, and they don't need to be wasting time on those pages. And I think that you need to be driving traffic to the content that makes it most clear about what you do and how you do it. And you can have a look at the kinds of sites that they are aware of, the kind of pages that they're aware of on your site, and it will give you an idea of what they know about your site. I also have another tool that I've added to the resource collection, which Dana will share later, that allows you to get an idea of what a brand knows, or what an LLM knows about your brand, and you can ask them, like, what can you tell me about this brand? What does this brand do? And then you can go back and you can correct them with some of those things. But it will also give you an information about where they're getting that information on your website, and which pages should be prioritized in the crawl.
Awesome. Yeah, like, if you take nothing away from this presentation, this is the thing.
Thank you. I hope they take things. Okay, so let's also think about optimizing for augmented LLMs first. So this is all about timing. And this means that essentially you need to rank on search. And then you will be visible in search, in a search augmented LLM, and then you will be visible in a pre-trained model LLM. So essentially, this is like how the data flows. So this will be like later on. So essentially, like, when you're visible in search, you can rank on search quickly. Like, you can be indexed on a page very quickly, or on Google, on Bing, on whatever, very quickly. And then you can be accessible to a search augmented LLM because you have been crawled on that website. I mean, one of the things I talked about between the time that I started looking at Site of Sites, for instance, and the time that we started showing up in Gemini, for instance, I was doing work on indexing during that time. So that's what we can do. So in terms of thinking about ranking on search, you need to rank on search first, then you'll be visible in a search augmented LLM. And then when they update the training sets, you'll be more likely to be part of the training model further on. And it's also that the training model updates happen more infrequently than the search augmented updates. So that's just a question of timing. Okay, now let's think about brand entities. And for this, I need help from a Barbie. So this is really important. When I started thinking about this, I first searched for myself on ChatGPT, and I essentially got the equivalent of that Mariah Carey meme, that I don't know her meme, and they just didn't know who I was. Then months and months after that, they said, "Oh, yeah, no, we do know Crystal Carter. She's that person from Wix who does this, this, and this." And I was like, "Oh, thank you, wonderful, fantastic." And this made me realize that these things can change. So one of the things I had to look at the Barbie movie summary. And the Barbie movie summary doesn't actually say anything about a movie, doesn't actually say anything about a toy, doesn't say anything about Mattel, doesn't say anything about that stuff. It says Barbie and Ken are having the time of their lives in Barbie land, blah, 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 blah. Joys and perils ensue, etc. I ran this through TextRaiser, which is an NLP tool, which is an oldie but a goodie. They have a fantastic free demo that I use all the time. That's really, really great. And what it does is it pulls out the entities from your text. So what it pulled out from this one, even though it doesn't say anything about Mattel, even though it doesn't say anything about dolls or toys or anything to that effect, because you have Barbie in close proximity to Ken, the entities that it's able to identify are Ken doll, Barbie doll, Mattel, fashion doll, Mattel franchises. They can understand that specifically just from this text. Why? Because they understand entities and they have named entity recognition. And this is something that you see materializing in LLMs. So I went to Claude and I said, name a fashion doll, and they said Barbie. Great. I went to ChatGPT and I said, name a fashion doll, and they said a well-known fashion doll is Barbie. Great. Then I went to Copilot and I said, name a fashion doll, and they said the most iconic fashion doll is Barbie. And then because they're Bing, they put a lot of ads that weren't even Barbie. Then I went to Perplexity and I said, name a fashion doll. And they said, Barbie is the most iconic fashion doll and well-known fashion doll created by Mattel. Great. Wonderful. Then I went to Gemini and I said, name a fashion doll. And they said, here are some names for a fashion doll. And the first name that they said was Barbie, but they didn't quite understand what I mean. And they asked me, do you have any preferences for the themes in mind for your doll's name? Which was ridiculous. But they did get there in the end. So overall, all the bots did pretty good. We're pretty happy with this one. So how did Barbie become so good at LLM optimization? Well, the Barbie entity is pretty rock solid. You know, they're a very well-established IP, and if you go to their Wikipedia page, the first thing that it says is Barbie is a fashion doll. The first thing it says. Founded by Ruth Handler, or created by Ruth Handler, and run by the company Mattel. And this is something that's important to think about. LLMs are all trained on Wikipedia because Wikipedia is 66 million pages of human vetted, always up to date information that is very, very, very well organized. And I think that this is something that people overlook. But because it's all trained on Wikipedia, they're trained on entities and thus on the knowledge graph. So this is important to think about when you're thinking about how you do your LLM optimization. So if you don't have a Wikipedia page, if you don't have a presence on Wikidata, if you aren't connecting with entities, then this is something that you should invest in order to do this. So think about managing your entry on Wikipedia or Wikidata. Think about claiming knowledge panels. And people might say, well, I'm not that big and fancy. I don't have a knowledge panel. Well, guess what? If you're in a local business, you kind of do. So your Google Business Profile counts as part of your knowledge panel. So that's worth thinking about. Implement schema to make sure that you've got good information and that you're organizing your information in an appropriate way that works well for that, and make sure that you're aligning your content and links to known entities. One of the examples I like to give is if I said the phrase, Steve McQueen is a man known for his films, that actually applies to two Steve McQueens. There's Steve McQueen from like back in the day, driving fast cars, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's Steve McQueen, who's currently working, who's does lots of artsy stuff and it's like super cool. Now, if I said Steve McQueen is an Academy Award winning Turner Prize director known for his film, then that's only one Steve McQueen. Why? Because I've got Steve McQueen entity, I've got the Academy Awards entity, and I have the Turner Prize entity. So even if you don't have a Wikipedia page, if you went to a college that has a Wikipedia page, if you work for a company that has a Wikipedia page, if you are connected to certain entities, and it's worth making sure that you're defining those entities when you're describing yourself and your business. So make sure you're thinking about that. Also, make sure you're getting involved with the platforms. Now, there's a lot of people thinking about LLMs, talking about SEO, LLMs, meditating on LLMs. But we actually have to get involved, right? So this isn't something that we have to do. That can be really, really complicated. We can make our own custom branded GPTs, and this is really important because when you go into ChatGPT, any custom GPT that you've touched upon shows up in the top left of your screen, right? So that's brand visibility, okay? And not only that, but it also has a link in your website. So we have a web builder GPT that's in ChatGPT. It's had over 100,000 chats. It was a featured one in ChatGPT before. That's one that's available there. And these rank. So not only do you show up in ChatGPT, but it also ranks in search. So this is also ranking in search. And this also gives you, two opportunities to increase your brand visibility, both using the LLM and because of the LLM. So build custom GPTs for brand visibility with billions of GPT users. And if they search for you in ChatGPT and you're there, that's great. That puts you as a forward-thinking company and gives you an opportunity to connect with folks. And there's also people who are actively embedding links in their outputs from their ChatGPT from their custom GPTs. And then there's one that I was seeing that was a visualizer creator, and that was super, super useful. And it's easy to do it that way. And yeah, it's really, really valuable. Another one to think about it is thinking about publishers. So the team over at Detailed have published this. I'm sure we've all seen it, where it talks about some of the top publishing networks in Google and how there's not that many of them. There lots of people are in different groups. So there's 16 different publishers who are on Google, and ChatGPT is essentially taking a Thanos approach, going around just capturing many of them. So in 2024, they partnered with 3 out of 16 top publishers. I think they recently just announced that they're also publishing. I think they just announced another partnership as well. And essentially, they have collabs with loads of folks. We're talking Hearst, Vox Media, Condé Nast, Time, Atlantic, News Corp, Prisa, Le Monde, etc. But they're also not the only ones. So Perplexity also has collaborations with folks like Time and Entrepreneur, and for some reason the Texas Tribune. But hey, go for it, Texas, and Der Spiegel as well. And so you might be thinking though, hey, I'm not the Times. Like, I'm not Condé Nast. I don't know how you think this is going to be relevant to me at all. However, there's a couple of ways that this can be useful. If you are a big player, you should consider becoming an LLM partner, because this means that that you can manage the data that you're giving to the LLM. If you think about Reddit's partnership and things like that, then this means that you're able to become part of the training data, and presumably you can manage and negotiate how you're going to have your data shown there. The other one that you should be thinking about is prioritizing backlinks from those partner websites. So this might, again, people might think, oh, but I'm never going to get a backlink from, from Time or from the Atlantic. I'm a small player, et cetera, et cetera. However, a lot of those websites and a lot of those news teams have smaller offshoots. So my local newspaper is part of the News Corp syndication collection. So have a look at which news outlets that you have access to are part of which companies, and where that will play in, because that could give you access to more visibility within LLMs. Perplexity pages. Perplexity has pages, and they create pages, and you can basically create a page on a topic and it will include links. This is one, for instance, that has 57,000 views, and this is and they also rank. So they've started this in the spring of 2024, and you're starting to see visibility across them. And essentially, they're AI generated. So you would ask for a topic, like let's say, best Beyonce outfits or something, and then it would pull out all of the different links through there, and it would start generating content for you. And then you can edit which ones will show there. And not only that, but those pages rank on Google, and you even get featured snippets. So build pages on Perplexity is another one that you should be thinking about. Now, once you've done all of that, how do you actually monitor any of this? Good question. There is the fantastic Jess Schultz, and there are other folks who have also done this as well, but Jess was the first one that I saw who is really getting into this, who has a regex, and this is it in bigger form, and it basically pulls out all of the different AI tools, and it allows you to see what's going on there, and you can use it as an exploration in GA4. And if you don't know how to do an exploration in GA4, talk to Dana; she can help you with all of that.
I was going to say, we also recently published an article on how to build a channel for AI traffic in GA4, so you don't need to go into explorations, because no one likes doing that. Yes, and so that's on our website. We'll include that in the email that goes out afterwards as well.
And I will be reading that, and I'll be adding that to my deck. So that's cool. Wonderful. So yeah, but basically you can see this in ChatGPT, you can see this in GA4, whether you're using regex, whether you're using Dana's fantastic methods. It's something that you can have a look at. And there's also folks who are offering this as a service. So Seer Interactive are really leading the charge on this, and they have been doing some fantastic work around ChatGPT tracking for months now. And they offer this as a service, and they can do this at scale for folks, and so that's worth doing as well. And I think they're doing something similar to sort of bulk queries and things like that, and that's worth looking at as well. And also on my article on the Wix SEO Learning Hub, which Dana will also share as well, you can find a link to my LLM tracker, which also allows you to see your brand visibility in LLMs, and you can ask lots of questions about like what is what. And basically, you can enter your brand name, and it'll say like, "What is my brand name? What do you know about it? What is good about it?" Those sorts of things as well, and then you can get those sort of information about your brand in your LLM. And with that, I wish you good
luck. You always have such a great GIF game in your decks. Thank you.
I must say, I'm a little lazy. I picked Beyonce because there's a million Beyonce GIFs.
Yeah,
and also
she's very GIFable.
Yeah, that's true.
And most people know who she is. It's perfect. It's the combination of everything you need. All right. So we have a few questions from the chat. And if you have a question you haven't asked it yet, please ask. I am keeping an eye on the comments coming in from LinkedIn and YouTube. All right, so first question, is Perplexity most updated when compared to Gemini and ChatGPT? I mean, they sort of have a live feed, so I would assume they would be the most up-to-date, right?
Perplexity I find to be really, really good. I recently, I mean, I sometimes check these things with live questions or like really, really recent questions. So I remember checking Copilot like 2 days after the Oscars, and I said, "What did Zendaya wear to the Oscars?" And Copilot said Zendaya did not go to the Oscars. She was hanging out with her boyfriend Tom Holland. Her and that was really good because on all over Twitter at the time they were saying, oh, Zendaya wore this or Zendaya wore that, and people were posting pictures, and like news outlets were reporting that she had worn this outfit, but they were all AI generated images. So I think that it's worth the best way to do it is to ask the same question across most of them to confirm, but they're changing every day. So I would probably say that the last time I checked, I literally just checked what was the response to Demi Moore's Golden Globe speech just before we started on ChatGPT, for instance, and ChatGPT was pulling out great references. So they referenced, the kinds of folks you would expect to know about this. Grazia, BuzzFeed, Glamour, New York Post, for instance, they pulled that out straight away. So I think that it's worth looking at that. Perplexity is moving more towards being like real-time information. So they just launched their sports tracking information, which again is a real-time feed. So I think that Perplexity is definitely trying to hold that space.
Yeah, and there's interesting about the sports stuff. So I thought about I play a lot of fantasy football, which anyone who follows me would know this. And I thought about I use Claude mostly for like fantasy football analysis this year. I did not, but next year might be the year that I try, although I did fine without it. So maybe
Okay.
I don't need it. I mean, it's all percentages either way and weird emotions. And I like this team, therefore they're going to win. So yeah, we'll see.
Sometimes there's a little faith.
Yeah, just a little bit. I thought for sure Buffalo's going to win, and they did. So hey, you just gotta go through your routines. That's obviously superstition is true, right?
Yeah. Very important.
Yeah. All right, next question from Sophie. She had a question. So this is when you were searching for yourself on ChatGPT, and is this because your own ChatGPT is learning about you, or did you test it anonymously? And I don't know if ChatGPT holds on to stuff that you teach it. I know that Claude does not, because I've asked it repeatedly. But
yeah, so I tested it. Anonymously to confirm that. I've Googled myself enough times to know that you should check those things. But I'm also the kind of person who will check things on seven different platforms and from seven different devices whenever I'm testing anything. That's just a little bit of an obsessive testing method that I have. So I think that it's worth doing that. And I think that in terms of training, I know folks who will go to ChatGPT and they'll say, "Tell me about myself." And that will tell you how much ChatGPT is storing about you in terms of that kind of information. But I think that if you want to see what's going on with your brand, then it's worth logging in separately to see how that works, and or asking a few different folks to log in for you. So in my resource, my LLM brand tracker, I link to a few different resources. There is a tool called SpyFu, for instance, which has queried ChatGPT, I think 2 million times or something like that, or many, many more than that. And so you can go to that and enter in your brand name and see what kinds of outputs it got about your brand. So you can, for instance, enter in, your football team and see what it says about that particular football team. And that is a more anonymous sort of element. And I think also one of the things I recommend, so with my LLM brand tracker, I set it up so that it was like free to use for anybody to use. However, if you were to connect it to something like GPT for Sheets, for instance, you can scale that, and you can essentially like enter in a formula, and then it will scrape it for you, and that again will add some more anonymity to it. But I do think it's worth checking again on some of the queries that are most important to you.
Cool, that's great. Okay, Mackenzie would like to know, how do you recommend brands balance prioritizing natural language content and technical elements like schema markup when optimizing for LLMs? And it's also been interesting because I've been seeing a lot of discussion on LinkedIn that schema doesn't actually matter for LLMs. I'm like, yes, it doesn't yet, but you know?
But yeah, so I'm joining that webinar with the team over at Sightbulb in
Mm-hmm.
February, and I will be doing some information in between.
Mm-hmm.
The digging that I found was that they're not reading it in the same way.
Yeah.
However, Google has been reading schema markup for years. Bing has been reading schema markup for years, and again, Google and Bing are both using that to help guide their understanding of search. So if it's a search enabled GPT, or sorry, a search enabled LLM, then as I said, first you rank on search, then you rank on something else. And I think that it's important to remember that first, that if ChatGPT is not ChatGPT, if schema markup is part of you ranking first, then it will contribute to your LLM further down the line. Is it a direct correlation in the same way that is schema a direct ranking factor? No, but schema in terms of standard SEO, schema isn't a direct ranking factor. However, the schema, the rich results show above everything else. Therefore,
it's a ranking factor.
Yeah. Right. Therefore, you kind of rank ahead of everyone. So what I would say is that I think at this stage, LLM optimization should be treated kind of similarly to CRO, in that if you have high volume, high traffic, and if you're a big brand like Wix.com, for instance, we've got millions of folks coming to our URLs every day. We're able to get a lot more signals and a lot more information about what's going on with folks who are looking us up on LLMs, et cetera, than somebody who's getting 200 a day, for instance. And so similarly with CRO, if you're able to test it very quickly, because you're like, okay, well, we've had 400, a million hits on this, and therefore we can take a decision that 10% of people are more likely to do this, or people are 10% more likely to make this decision. Similarly, you will need some time to see the queries come through the LLM if you're a smaller team. So it might take you longer to do. So as I was saying, with the bot log optimization, with the crawl optimization, you can update your crawl maybe that month. Maybe that's what you do that month. Maybe the next month you spend some time on your Wikipedia. Maybe the next time you spend some time going over your entities and making sure that they make sense. So I think that in terms of balancing, I think that it's very, very similar to CRO. If you're a small team, then maybe add in a little bit of time. If you're a bigger team, then maybe add in more time, because you will have more queries that are more relevant to that space, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Okay. What would your recommendation be for brand optimization when you have brands that are easily confused due to their name similarities?
Yeah, so this is fun. So yeah, I think that this is something that again comes down to thinking about your entities. And if you find that when people Google you, for instance, if you think about Chicago the band and Chicago the city, for instance, or if you think about other folks that have the same kind of names, you will know that when people go to there's Chicago the musical as well. So you will know that when people go to Google, that there's that disambiguation that needs to happen, that sometimes people need to go, no, I mean Chicago the musical, or no, I mean Chicago the band. And if that's the case, then you will know that that's something that you need to think about. What I have seen, and this is again why I emphasize the entity element, is that I spoke to somebody who was doing it, who had an agency, and they were like, we never show up in ChatGPT. We've been trying to show up in ChatGPT for ages, blah, 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 blah. And I went to their website, and they had one of those websites, which is classic, where you go to the website and you don't know what they do. They're like, I don't know what you do. I can't
just say
tell.
It on the homepage. Just say
what
you do.
Say it.
Just say
it. So I'm looking at their website and I can't tell what they do. And similarly, I looked at some big agencies, and they were saying we are an award-winning agency that works across 200 150 different countries, and we are great at doing creative campaigns. And then another big agency, we are an award-winning agency that works in 150 countries, and we did it. And basically they're identical. So I think that uniqueness is really, really important. And again, defining yourself alongside the entities that are related to you. So, we think about Barbie. Barbie is a fashion doll, right? It's a doll about fashion, right? and it's owned by Mattel, which is also an entity. Ruth Handler, also an entity. These are important. If I think about myself, for instance, I'm Crystal Carter. I work at Wix. I went to Kenyon College. I'm from California. Like there are entities that I can attach to myself, even if nobody knew anything about me, even if I didn't even have my own page. There are other entities that can distinguish me from other Crystal Carters, and that's really important to think about. So how is your brand distinct, and how are you articulating that on your website, and how can you make sure that when people look for you that they're able to find you? So if somebody, like, let's reverse engineer it, right? If you were to say, I'm looking for a company that specializes in cloud-based websites, right? There's only going to be so many websites, so many folks that do that, and we're going to show up there. And I know that because I've done that query. So it's one that you can look up. So reverse engineer it. And again, in my brand book, or my brand visualization tool, I talk about, I have some of those questions that you can ask. And again, they're kind of seed questions. And you can also go to an LLM and say, like, what questions would you recommend that I ask an LLM to find more information, to find out what this LLM knows about my brand. So I think it would be useful to do that. And you could also take the same LLM document that I have and ask it about a competitor, and see what the difference is, and see how you can make it more distinct.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Great advice. Okay, we're going to end things off with a couple of non-LLM specific questions for you. So if there was such a thing as digital marketing crimes, what would be the number one you would want to prosecute? You're now the Attorney General of SEO. What do you got?
We are on the internet, right? And like, as somebody who deals in analytics and metrics and things, like, that we can see what's going on, and in a lot of ways, and maybe we can't see everything. However, what I cannot stand is when we have a situation where someone's like, this is our goal, and I'm like, how are we going to measure it? And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, what do you mean? I don't know. We have to know. We have to know. Yes. I need my gold star. I need to be able to say it's gone up and to the right, or maybe it's flat, or whatever it is. I need to know if it worked. And when we have goals that are just hopes and prayers, like hopes and dreams, it's not enough for me.
Aspirational. Yes, that's what I call them. Yeah.
Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. We can't pay the bills with hopes and clicks.
No, we cannot. All right. And what is a tip that you recently learned?
I mean, I was thinking about this, but like, I think I'm gonna go back to my deck. I was really surprised at how effective the up arrow was, or like the up thumb was. And that's something that I recently learned. And it just made me think, like, with all of these machine learnings, like, they're machines and they're learning. And so it's really important that you take the time to make sure that they are learning the appropriate things about you. So I honestly jumped out of my chair when I saw that it had done the thing that I wanted it to. And that's really important. And I think that make sure that you spend the time learning the tools and learning how they work and learning how they respond to inputs.
Yeah. And I also like your tip about just ask the LLM. What question should I ask you? Like, it will tell you.
It will.
It wants to help you. It help you. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much again for joining me today. So as we mentioned, we are going to send out an email afterwards to everyone who's registered. So if you're watching this on YouTube, head on over to our LinkedIn page and make sure to register for the webinar there, so that we will make sure to get your email address. Or you can just DM me if you want to get a copy of the resources. They don't show up in your inbox. That is totally fine. DM me on LinkedIn though, please. I don't check X/Twitter anymore. All right. Our next webinar actually is a great jumping off point from this one. So I already, was going to get Aleda Solis is a fantastic speaker, one of my favorites as well. And I said to her, what do you want to talk about? Anything, totally up to you. And she said, what about SEO for brand visibility and recognition? I'm like, oh, this is so perfect as a follow-up to Crystal's talk. So join us on February 18th. We're going to have that published to our Kickpoint Playbook LinkedIn page page later this afternoon. Please make sure to register there. We'll also have it on our YouTube as well if you prefer to follow the stream on YouTube. And definitely watch your email for those follow-up resources. You'll get a replay of this webinar and a discount on Kickpoint Playbook courses if you would like to learn more about using analytics for agencies or Practical GA4. And all the comments have been deeply complimentary. Thank you again, Crystal, for joining us and this fantastic presentation. I'm so glad you're able to bring it to our Kickpoint Playbook audience.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.